And that would allow for slave owners to get their money back, so they would sell the slaves where?
To the south.
And what I gave a name for that, didn't I?
Downriver.
Downriver. And the sectional crisis, what was the issue of the sectional crisis? Slavery where?
In the south.
In the new state. Territories.
Territories. Because they weren't states yet. Slavery in the territories. And did this fall off? Did I just throw it?
Yeah.
And unions, I went through like the wage system and workers' working conditions, that they have problems with the new system that's being created. What is it called when a labor union negotiates a contract for all the workers? What's that called? Something
Group bargaining.
close to group bargaining. Bargaining's in it. Collective bargaining. Collective bargaining. Did you say corrupt? Oh, the corrupt bargain, that's Jackson. But collective bargaining is for labor unions. Now, labor unions negotiate a contract for all workers. What was a pro-worker party but was bitterly divided? Did I say that one?
Locos.
The Loco Focos, which, by the way, would not make a good name for a child, but would make a good name for a dog, don't you think?
What was it called? Collective bargaining.
Yeah, collective bargaining. And
Wait, that was
Would
part of the.
no, that was what labor unions wanted. Labor unions wanted collective bargaining for all the workers. I know we had this yesterday. So those who thought that capitalism and this new wage system was going to be inherently unfair, what were those people called?
Social.
Yeah, socialists, and they wanted what kind of society?
Classes.
Classes. Not everyone equal, but classless. And we'll come back to the attack on socialists is always going to be that they want to take away something from somebody who's earned it, so to speak, and give it to somebody who hasn't. It is a very effective argument against it, but not really what it is. And also, who wrote the Communist Manifesto? Marx. It's Marx and Engels, but Marx is one we need to know for this class. And their ultimate goal is, but never clear how they would do it, was have workers control what? Yeah, which is what the name for means of production? The capital. What was it called where it spread slavery out? So it would eventually go away. At least that's what Jefferson thought. But Southerners started to say they want diffusion to defend slavery, because if slavery isn't diffused, you're condemning the South to what? That constant fear of slave rebellion. And so with that, we have where are we?
You just
Where's the mouse?
Missouri Compromise. South Haven.
Did we get to this? Did we get the senatorial balance?
Yes.
Did we get to this?
What is this? What?
Yeah, we got
Yes.
that. This is what-
You just.
Okay.
You stopped right.
So here's the compromise. This is by Senator Thomas. Oh, you make random noises that'll pop into my head. Thomas of Illinois. And what it was is Missouri would be a slave state, and Maine, which was part of Massachusetts back then, would become a free state, thus keeping senatorial balance. That's the original compromise. But then what about the other territories? Now don't forget, slavery in the territories, this is already decided. Okay, Florida was a territory, but they already had slave codes. Same with Arkansas. But what about this big block of the Louisiana Purchase? When this was written, it's still part of Spain. Within a year, Mexico is going to revolt and become independent. And this is still contested territory. Once again, not bothering to ask the people who live there. So what they decided was this. A relatively arbitrary line, but it's going to be the southern border of Missouri. Any territory, so north of this, no slave codes in the Louisiana Purchase. That's LA, Louisiana. No slave codes north of Louisiana, slave code in Louisiana territory. Let me start over. Act like I never said anything. Let's go back. It's only for the Louisiana Purchase. 3630. North of this, no slave codes. South, slave codes.
What? Wait.
3630. In the Louisiana Purchase.
Which is the bottom of Missouri.
Yeah, right there. So Missouri is an exception to this rule. It has nothing to do with these states. They've already been in the Union. Remember what I told you, slavery in the territories. So it's that territory free, that territory slave. And on the surface, which section does this seem to benefit? Does it seem to benefit the North? Because there's not a lot of area that's, I mean, at the most, maybe 2 slave states.
Wait, so you said at the 3630, everything of the North can't have slaves?
Of the Louisiana Purchase. So that's here.
Oh, okay.
It's already been decided here. And what section wanted this? The South wanted this. And the problem is this, when it actually happened, when they had the first vote over that bill having these 2 big parts, technically I guess you could say 3 parts, it didn't pass. It failed. And at that moment, it really did have this feeling that this might spiral out of control to civil war. It's amazing how much they talked about civil war in these 40 years before the actual Civil War. Talked about it all the time. Well, a couple things out of it. First off, Southerners were furious about 3630, and then they started thinking, first off, can laws be changed? So whatever. But secondly, more important, do you think the U.S. will stop here?
No.
There's a lot of land here, all the way down to Argentina. And they were thinking about getting it all. So what the heck? And also the Caribbean islands. They really wanted Cuba. That could be 2 slave states. And so whatever. And then Henry Clay, remember he was one of did the American system. He was a war hawk. He came in with a plan. Let's split the bill up into 2 separate bills. 2 separate bills that will pass separately. Southerners will vote for the states coming in. Northerners will vote for 3630. And both of those pass separately. And Clay would soon be dubbed the Great Compromiser, as he would be part of many compromises. A few of them arguably helped save the Union. And he really thought he would ride this to the presidency. And there's a very awkward looking picture of Clay. Whenever you see anybody, a picture or a painting, and they're kind of looking down, that increases their stature, makes them look taller, like they're in charge. Somebody looking up looks like they're looking up to an authority figure. Looking down, I'm in power. So I look down, and you notice that's part of my aura. But that's Clay. He thought he would ride this to the presidency because he also had a vast economic plan. So they split the bill, it passed. Oh, I should add, the Union was saved. The Union was saved. That's kind of a big deal. No, it did not prevent civil war, but by pushing this back, a lot of things would change. Did not mean that they solved the problem. Compromises really did. Yeah.
So you know in that like map, the like Oregon country, is anybody living there?
There's a few traders for people of European descent.
Mm-hmm.
There were a few Spanish settlements down here, but most of them have been evacuated.
Okay.
English, few Americans, and then a significant number of tribes, but they have been devastated by the diseases. Just like when the diseases arrived here in the 17th century, here in the end of the 18th.
So it's like pretty empty.
Not that many people, yeah. So, but a lot of people have claimed. Russia had a claim too, and so did Spain, but it's basically now boiling down to the U.S. and Britain. So we got to, Clay also proposed something I've mentioned once before, this huge nationalistic program called the American System. And he thought he would ride this to victory. That protecting tariff. There was a big increase in the tariff, 25 to 35% taxes in 1816. He seemed to get what he wanted. And remember, there's only Republicans now, and they used to be opposed to it. There's a new bank. And he wants more internal improvements, roads, canals. And in the 1830s, this is an ad for expansion of the B&O Railroad with internal improvements. The Baltimore and Ohio was the first railroad in the United States. And so, B&O, the Baltimore and Ohio. It's also a monopoly, but. And so Clay had this system, and he really thought, Bank of the U.S.
I was like, what?
He really thought you combine the compromise with this system and it would get him the presidency. He really believed that. And in fact, in 1824, it looked like there was going to be a number of people running. But something that people like Clay did not count on. This was a changing country. Now, you do not have to write anything down except for Jackson, right? Andrew Jackson, and I'll tell you a couple more things about him. But I put this out here just kind of give you an idea about his life. So just put down Jackson for now. So the reason I put down that date, do you notice that? He's the last president who will be born before the Revolutionary War, and he fought in it. He was a spy and then fought as a young boy. 10, 12, 13 years old, he was fighting in the Revolutionary War. He was actually captured by the British in his home, North Carolina, during the 1780, and was tortured and beaten by the British. And I can't even describe what a big impact this would have on his life. Here's a lithograph of Jackson. And what happened was, when he was captured and roughed up as essentially a spy, they said, they threatened him with execution, but they said, this British officer, and right here, was ordered to lick and then clean the boots of a British officer. And Jackson, who was 12, refused. He refused to do it. It says 13 right here, but he was not yet 13. He refused to do it. And so he was beaten. They slashed him with a sword here, here in his hand, across his face and head. And he would wear these scars, like a badge of honor. And then right after this, his mom had already died and his dad died, and he blamed the British. His hatred for the British was only topped by his hatred for the aristocracy. When I mean aristocracy, these elites who passed on their wealth and power and position to their children. He hated that. He thought everybody in the United States should be judged on what they do while they're alive, not by luck of birth. If they were born rich, they should not get all the benefits. And so he really was infuriated by this elite. So back to this. So he was orphaned. Charles, he would go to Tennessee. So do get down, he lived in Tennessee. He was in Tennessee. Lived outside of Nashville. He did become a slave holder. Became rich on his own. He was about as poor and of common birth as you could possibly imagine. There's very few presidents that have started out as poor. Didn't have much. Him, Mark Van Buren, Andrew Johnson. Truman, Clinton. Obama was lower middle class, but certainly wasn't poor, but he didn't have much. Most of them are very wealthy. You know, Trump was born incredibly wealthy. His dad only gave him about $600 million. It's not bad. And Bush was very wealthy. Most of them very wealthy. But back to this. So, someone who fit that aristocratic birth that he hated, Charles Dickinson and him were rivals in Tennessee. And Dickinson accused Jackson's wife of being an adulteress. Jackson's wife was divorced. And just a woman who's divorced in the 19th century was considered a fallen woman. There's something immoral about her for being divorced. And a couple other things that happened. By the way, of course, not men, but women. But also, probably women are more evil, correct? And they bring good, honest men down. By the way, that was pretty common. And what a great thing for men to say. It wasn't my fault, it was yours. But sexism was amazing, just like racism. But he thought, so he was furious about this. And then horse racing was a big deal. He accused Jackson's friend, and therefore by the fact they were friends, Jackson, of cheating in horse racing. And so they challenged him to a duel. Now, remember we talked about duels. I talked about they actually stood 20 paces apart. Do you remember how they each had a second? So they could at least have some kind of deniability that they actually were coming there to kill somebody. And they had someone start it. You know, and that's why Hamilton and Burr had that debate often kind of private so no one could see. Well, in the Wild West, which was Tennessee at that time, they just did it right in the open. So they had a second. They had the whole thing, and yet there were hundreds of people there watching the duel. it's like a spectator sport, which is actually kind of funny, but that was a normal. I mean, they knew no one's ever really going to be arrested. And so when they went there, Jackson had already fought many duels. The rumor is he fought over 100. It's confirmed he fought over 13. Most of the duels they did, remember I told you about they shoot in the air, shoot in the ground? But there were a few with Jackson, they literally just beat the heck out of each other. They just turned into a big rumble, and the one standing, or at least kind of standing, won. And which was almost always Jackson. But here, Dickinson was a crack shot, and Jackson knew it. But Jackson had iron nerves, and it's hard to shoot something. Shooting a target is different than shooting something that's alive. Jackson knew that. And so his strategy was always to let the other man shoot first. And Jackson could decide instinct. Now most of the time he'd shoot in the air. He could decide. And so when they fought this duel, imagine this dirt street, they have seconds, but then they have all the streets lined up and people on both sides cheering them on. It's surreal and ghoulish. So Jackson is like this, handkerchief was dropped, that's when they shoot. And Dickinson shot immediately. And what happened? Jackson's hit here, so ripped apart his ribs, through his lungs, through his stomach, and lodged next to his heart. So he collapsed, I mean, it just, collapsed lung, that wonderful feeling of collapsed lungs. That first breath, the pain is what? Exquisite. Now, I bruised my lungs and broke a rib. And I remember how bad that hurt. I can't even imagine collapsing it. How'd I do? Okay, but this is what happened. There was a biker gang attacking the orphanage. And I went in there and I fought them off, but they got me right here. Or maybe I fell out of a tree. I can't remember which one, but I'll give you a hint. I'm not fond of heights anymore. Moving back to this. Yeah, I fell out of a tree onto a rock. That was not, huh? Well, there was a biker gang attacking the leaves. I think we're trying to make a tree house. It wasn't a good one. But what did Jackson do after he was hit? Supposedly, all Jackson did is this. Got hit. He went. Put the hand over it and glared. You can imagine Dickinson's like, oh God. And I guess blood was just gushing out. You can imagine. He covered it. But blood is, just down. His shirt was covered. He had blood all over where his feet were. I mean, it just gushing. And Jackson took careful aim. Dickinson, as the kind of the rules of duel, could not run. Pulled out his pistol, click. The hammer went to the half-cock position and locked. Now, was that a misfire? Because if it's a misfire, the duel's done. Jackson decided, I don't care. Clipped it back all the way, bang, right in the heart. Jackson would later say, even if he would have shot me in the brain.
Step on it. It's right by your foot.
No! He's fine!
No, where is it?
Bring us back an L.
Oh, what?
Steve. So what happened? Yeah, Steve. Hope I don't step on Steve by accident. What? Huh? No, why? But he's looking at you. Good eye. All right, so here's the best part, though. This one always gets me. So after he would say all the people rushed to him, tell him to the doctor, which the doctor can. What's the doctor going to do? But Jackson brushed him aside, hand right here, holding it, walked. Now the story was he had to walk a long way, so he was like a mile or half a mile, but he had to walk to the doctor, and he did it on his own, walking. He claimed he had, or his friend said he had so much lead in him, by the time he was president, he rattled. Because what could they do with a musket ball next to his heart? They stuck the probe in, and they slept. One of the musket ball was here and just.
How big are they?
Ow, 50 caliber. A
Do-
big hunk of lead.
do with your
Big.
hand.
Huh?
How big is it with your
Like,
hand?
where's any truth to that?
Truth of what?
Yeah,
Yeah,
really shot and like there's lungs and.
Yeah, no, that supposedly is true, and I believe it. Jackson was the toughest man ever to live.
Well, I don't doubt that.
Jackson was the toughest man ever to live, and I'll tell you right now, if Jackson walked right through that door, two things. Number one, we're not gonna mess with him, right? Number two, we'd be very afraid because he's been dead for over 170 years. But, God, you want me to give him to Mr. Larson?
Yes. You
Oh my
It's us. I don't know if you know this, but you're a lot bigger than this fight.
That's probably one of the most dangerous. Spider, you want it? I looked down and the spider's just still running.
Yeah, he's in Mr. Larson's room now. He likes it. So with that, huh? No, Spider doesn't have kids yet. But when he does, it'll be a few 100,000. But with that, moving. No, he doesn't. That'd be pretty funny. You're not getting rid of me that easy. Yeah.
We're at work, we had a spider in my glasses, and it laid eggs, but then we didn't feed it, so it just ate the eggs instead.
Oh my God.
It wasn't me, it was cool.
That's, the term for that is pragmatic. So after Dickinson, I should have, when he had this bullet taken out of him, it was a bullet here, not the one that, not for the duel, another one. This was probably from fighting along the frontier. But when he was president, and they had to remove it, what they did for him is literally, he did 2 shots of whiskey, he bit on a piece of leather, and they gouged it out. That's how things were when I was a kid. But these are things we've already mentioned. He became a national hero after these 2 battles, pretty controversial here, but that nickname Old Hickory, we got to get Old Hickory. You know, it's not old, it's Old Hickory. And that represented this idea of the common man. He had this nickname, he's like one of us. And so get down that he is a common man. He is the common man. He represents us, represents the people.
Like Jefferson.
He did like Jefferson, that's a good point, but there's a difference. Jefferson was elite, who said he represented the underlings. Jackson was the real deal. And the point I'm saying is, what made him representing the common man? Was it what Jackson wanted, and also where Jackson's roots were? Or was it just because he had a nickname? That's what Jackson's supporters did. His opponents would all of a sudden figure out, wait a second, if we can't beat him, let's come up with our own guy with a nickname. Fool him. Will it work? All the time.
Who is it?
The first one will be, remember Battle Tippecanoe, you know William Henry Harrison? Old Tip. And he was an aristocrat, but they sold him as another Jackson. Oh, the first attempt they tried was a guy by the name of Davy Crockett. And that failed miserably because Crockett was kind of a dolt. Yeah, then there'd be a TV show. So with that,
Who are his opponents?
huh?
Like, who are his opponents?
The elites. So remember this class argument, it's all about class then. And the arguments against him, speaking of Jefferson, look what Jefferson will say in 1824. He has no real connection with Jackson. He heard rumors about Jackson, but he heard that Jackson had a volcanic temper, which actually Jackson did, but Jackson was also incredibly charming. He was loyal. He was urbane. I mean, Jackson was not what they said, but he's not saying Jackson's like this. You know what he's really saying? Commoners. That's commoners. They can't control themselves. They're ruled by passions. Who do you need? Elite. And isn't that ironic?
Because he pretends to be a communist.
Exactly. So with that, the election of 1824, 5 people actually want to be president. Here's Clay. They're all Republicans. This egg-looking character is John Quincy Adams. He's the Secretary of State. Crawford represented Southern plantation owners. All of them are as elite as you can get. Western plantation, Southern plantation, and the son of a president.
What the heck is wrong with the dude's head?
Oh, it's aerodynamic. But with that, they're all elite. But nobody realized, except for those who knew that the country was changing, partially because of the Industrial Revolution. Andrew Jackson also. So we have Clay, Adams, and Crawford. They're all Republicans. Everybody's a Republican. And then Jackson. And Jackson, he innately knew the country was changing. Yes, he's a Westerner. Yes, now he's a plantation owner, but it's different. And then, remember I told you there'd be 5 guys? Crawford, Clay, and Adams, and then Jackson. There's one more. And that 5th person decided, you know what? It's not going to happen. I'm not going to be president. I'll be the vice president. So this person will be the vice president for whomever wins.
Who's it?
Who is it?
Calhoun.
I don't know. Let's look. Maybe it'll be a surprise. John C. Calhoun. Look, people. Look. And the school board has just sent down a ruling and edict from above.
How do you spell his name?
No, he's evil. Spider's good.
Let's say his name again.
John C. Calhoun.
How do you spell Calhoun?
C-A-L-H-O-U-N.
I spelled it right.
And one more thing. You're going to have neck hair to graduate. So some of you, and I just have a feeling some of you are going to have trouble. Some of you won't have trouble. But so I was at a baseball game once. Okay, so moving on. Whoever won, the time of the baseball game, this was actually in Billings, the big city, so it's cosmopolitan. This older gentleman sat down next to me, and I didn't really look. I was like, God, there's something odd about him. Not only did he have neck hair, it went like down to here, so right to here, and just all this hair. Huh? It's so cool, I know. So I take my neck hair and glue it up here. And then paint it with latex. So moving on. Calhoun will be the president. But, did I say Calhoun? We wouldn't have made that. That would have been a disaster. Let's get back. When the election happened, okay. Get serious. You look at the Electoral College. When the Electoral College, remember, that's all that matters. Nobody got a majority. Even though Jackson had more than anyone else in Florida, he didn't have the majority. But look, for the first time, there's a popular vote. More states were allowing the people to pick electors. And who got more popular vote? Jackson. And Jackson will claim it was the will of the people to have him as president. Yet, according to the Constitution, it doesn't matter. It's this. And no one won it goes to the House. I should add that you could argue that's the first time that we had a president who didn't get the popular vote but won the Electoral College. It would happen in 1824. It would happen again in 1876. It would happen again in 1880. Get my years right. 1888. What's the next time?
How did he not win the public?
2000.
He did win the public.
But he didn't become president. You have to win the Electoral College with a majority. So it goes to the House. Huh?
I thought Jackson.
Not in 24.
Wait, when was Jackson president?
We'll get to it. 28. 2000 and then 2016. I still can't believe, and I should add, there's a very good chance it will happen again.
It happened with Trump and Hillary, didn't it?
It happened with President Trump and it happened with President Bush. President Bush did not win the popular vote, but became president in 2000. And it could happen again in 2020. In fact, I could see a situation where the Democrat, whoever it is, could win by 7 or 8 million votes and still not be elected president. If Clinton won by almost 4 million. Yeah.
What's the point of campaigning then if the popular vote doesn't move which makes?
But voters pick the electors of the states. So you're trying to convince them. So in 2020, you can vote. So when all of us go vote for the president, we're voting for electors pledged to vote for whoever the Democrat is going to be and President Trump, who very well will be impeached but not removed from office. So it's going to be really interesting. What would come out of this is called the corrupt bargain, because the election goes to the House. And Clay, oh, I should have almost forgot something. Almost forgot. Crawford got a stroke, and so that pretty much ended his chance to become president. And it only goes to the top three. Clay was in fourth place. So it's basically Adams versus Jackson. Clay, though, was Speaker of the House. Adams supported the American system, so Clay supported Adams. Makes sense. But then here's the biggie. McCartney, that's he's doing Band on the Run, which was not only a #1 song and a #1 album, he would also win a Grammy. Okay, moving on. I won a Grammy, I would argue. With that, also, I'll tell you, did I tell you how I won a Grammy? No. And it worked. Adams won, and Jackson supporters were furious. And then turned around, Adams supported, appointed Clay as Secretary of State. Just as Adams was Secretary of State. In fact, almost every president was Secretary of State before he became president. And it looked like it was a bargain. Clay supports Adams, and Adams is anointing Clay his successor. A corrupt bargain. And so Jackson supporters said this bargain was corrupt. Why was it corrupt? And this is what we got to get. It went against the will of the people. It went against the will of the people. Remember the popular vote, which doesn't matter, but Jackson's using this politically. And what do you call a politician elected by the will of the people? What kind of system? What do we call that? A what? Yeah, a democracy. And that's what they said. You're going against the will of the people. We have to support a democracy. And Jackson supporters became known as the democracy. AKA, I know that sounds weird to our ears, but that's where you get the Democratic Party.
You just said this is what we need to get down, and then you said something.
The will of the people. Will of the people, which is democracy. And so that's what Jackson said. The will of the people. Common people now finally have a vote, or having that taken away. So that's the corrupt bargain. And you can imagine what's going to happen to his administration. It'll be a disaster. All the American system programs he wants will not pass. So the Adams administration will be 4 years just basically waiting for the rematch. By the way, what does he look like here? Here? How about here for the rematch? I argue, how about this picture? What does he look like? Because look at it. Isn't that the exact same? Look at it. It's exactly the same. John Quincy Adams was an amphibian. Jackson looks, I think Jackson looks cool there. This was, do get this down, it was a dirty campaign.
Wait, what year is this?
28. A dirty campaign, personal attacks. Adams' campaign said Jackson was bloodthirsty, responsible for unnecessary deaths of men on his campaign, including the old Horseshoe Bend in New Orleans campaign. Jackson had men executed for cowardice. Now, for being cowards.
Oh.
The problem with that was, yes, that is cruel, and I can't even wrap my mind around that today, but that was not uncommon then. But they still accused him of being bloodthirsty, just like a lower class person would do. Well, Jackson's defenders said that more and more the democracy, that Adams was an aristocrat, he's not the man of the people, he represents regular people, and Jackson will hang the tyrant. That's a pretty gruesome cartoon, isn't it?
How come it says old here?
How do you spell aristocrat?
How come it says old here instead of old?
Aristocratic, ARISTOCRATIC.
And those are the people that.
Well, real quick, for the bell ring, one thing real quick. the Tariff of 1828 was going to be a remake of the Tariff. And the average tariff was approximately 25%. This graph is a little bit long, it has it over 30, but the average tariff was 25%. And a bill was proposed to double the tariff to between 50 and 60%. But it was a trick by Jackson's supporters. That's why I put Democratic. Adams said he wanted the tariff. If the tariff passed, then Democrats could say that Adams, if he signed the bill, it made Adams look like he wants to put this huge tax on regular people. If Adams vetoes this too high a bill, it'll make Adams look like a hypocrite because he went against the bill. It was a trick. Adams knew it was a trick, but it passed, and he signed it. And then Jackson supporters turned around and said, this is no average tariff. This is no tariff of 1828. This is something more evil. This tariff that Adams has forced upon us is a tariff of abominations. Like the font. Like the font over here. You like the font? Isn't this a clever trick? It's stupid and ham-handed, but they're planning on the idea that most people don't pay attention. And guess what? Most people don't pay attention. So much different than today. That's being funny.
Why would he be a hypocrite?
Because Adams claimed he wanted a tariff. But if he vetoed the tariff that was way too high, they could say he was a hypocrite. You say you want a tariff, why don't you sign it? You're not telling the truth. It's ham-handed and stupid, yeah.
Jackson covered the tariff.
Yeah, Jackson supporters.
Why couldn't he just say it was too high?
Yeah, I know. And that's what he should have done. Instead, he signed it. I should have had that, people, they didn't campaign for themselves back then. That was seen as unseemly. Like you're begging for votes. So their supporters campaigned and letter writing. That actually be kind of nice, wouldn't it? No. But I like some of the candidates.
Can you define aristocrat?
Aristocrat is a combination. Aristocrat is upper class, up kind of ruling class. And most of the time, aristocrat is there. The name and the power, the wealth, the status. Who's this hand?
Huh? Oh, just a handbag?
Where'd you put down?
Well, I think it's either cook, guy, or it's actually with the military man.
Marco?
Yeah.
Now write down. You have to pick. You have to pick. This is so great.
Yes, yes. Wait, Mr. Parker?
Who's
Mr.
his handler? Hey, quit laughing. Who's his handler?
Marco.
Marco, North Korean. Who's handler?
Baby boy.
Baby boy. Baby boy. Who's a baby boy?
The one who got punched.
Oh,
Yeah, the one who got thrown into a glass ball.
that's the Korean.
South Korean guy.
Yeah, I just heard it. So, like, I did that with the rest of the house. Like,
I do remember doing it. Maybe I might hit the wrong button, or maybe I just wasn't thinking. Maybe I'm just out to get you. Which map? American System. I know you turned that in.
Yeah, because I was just absent the day that you turned it in.
I'll change.
Okay, thank you so much.
And it won't affect the, now the quarter's ready. But it's a semester credit. That's okay. See ya. All right, take out your thing. Make sure you must write down a person. Any question on the people? His name, Steve McQueen. He was an actor. He appeared in The Great Escape. It was a good movie. His character was totally made up. All these British prisoners, and they throw an American in there. But I gotta admit, the motorcycle scene is pretty cool. I like Steve McQueen. That's a good movie. It's only like 7 days long. It's a pretty long one. Yes.
So
Raymond Shaw, yes.
his accent, is it just a really intense transatlantic, or is he
He's trying to be like an upper crust
New England accent. He's trying to be the accent of a really elite.
I'm just curious. 'Cause it's-